Good evening and welcome to Voices of Hope's 11th Annual International Holocaust Remembrance Day. I am Peter Fishman, the president of Voices of Hope, and it is my honor to welcome you to this very special virtual program of remembrance. While we would prefer to be welcoming you to a brunch at the Emmanuel Synagogue in West Hartford and are disappointed not to be able to see you in person, it is our pleasure to offer this virtual opportunity for our community to be able to remember together. We are also excited to see that our audience has and continues to expand further across our state and even our country. Voices of Hope was founded by the children of Holocaust survivors and is dedicated to educating future generations, not only about the history of the Shoah, but about empathy and the incredible impact of acts of kindness. Throughout this and every year, we hold many events in line with our mission to promote a culture of courage, to stand up against hatred through Holocaust and genocide education and remembrance. In 2005, the United Nations deemed January 27th as a day of education and commemoration in honor of the liberation of Auschwitz concentration camp. Many in our audience tonight experienced life in Auschwitz firsthand or who have family members who did. Tonight, we honor the legacy of those who perished, those who survived, and those who remain dedicated to educating future generations in hopes that our future is bright, safe, and accepting of everyone. Voices of Hope is proud to be at the forefront of Holocaust and genocide education in Connecticut. We are working hard with the State Department of Education, teachers, and other experts statewide to ensure that Connecticut educators are given the tools that they need to prepare and communicate the lessons of the Shoah to thousands of school children annually. And we are committed to empowering students and the community at large to embrace diversity, stand up for what is right, and to understand what previous generations have learned through their experiences and through their voices. We thank you for your support and commitment to our mission, and we are certain that tonight's presentation will be moving, heartfelt, and educational for each and every one of us. Thank you very much for being with us.
Sag nicht kein Mal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg, Hotsch himlen bleiene, verstellen bläue Tag. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show, Zweckt a Pointon unser Trott mir seinen Do. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show, Sveta Poikton unser Trott mir seinen Do. Von grünem Palmenlatt bis weißen Fein von Schnee. Wir kommen on mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh. Und wo gefallen ist a Spritz von unser Blut. Sprotzen wird dort unser Gwure, unser Mut. Und wo gefallen ist a Spritz von unser Blut. Sprotzen wird dort unser Gwure, unser Mut. S wird die Morgensonn begilden uns dem Heind. Und der Nächten wird verschwinden mitten Feind. Nur oib versammeln wird die Sonn mit dem Kajor. Wie a Parol soll gehen das Lied von Dor zu Dor. Nur oib versammeln wird die Sonn in dem Kajor. Wie a Parol soll gehen das Lied von Dor zu Dor. Das Lied geschrieben ist mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Es ist nicht gewinn von a little of the frei. Das hat a Volk zwischen fallen dicke Wind. Das Lied gesungen mit Naganes in die Hand. Das hat a Volk zwischen fallen dicke Wind. Das Lied gesungen mit Naganes in die Hand. Das sag nicht keinmal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg. Chotschim len bleiene, verstellen bloje Tag. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show. Sveta poikton unser Trott mir seinen Do. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show. Sveta poikton unser Trott mir seinen Do.
It's an honor to participate in Voices of Hope's 11th Annual International Holocaust Remembrance Day. I'm Dr. Amy Weitz, the Maurice Greenberg Chair of Judaica Studies at the University of Hartford. I'd like to thank Kimberly Bolero, the director of the Hero Center, along with Kathy Fishman and Robin Landau of Voices of Hope for this invitation. While this virtual ceremony might be different from ones in the past, it nonetheless provides an important opportunity for us to gather as a community. In particular, I'd like to welcome the Holocaust survivors joining us, along with second and third generation survivors, rescuers, individuals who often risk their own lives and that of their families to save the lives of others, and liberators, those who entered concentration and death camps to save the life of others. It is in your honor and in the memory of everyone murdered during the Holocaust that we commemorate this day. I'd also like to recognize the teachers, students, and community members joining as well. Together, your participation affirms the collective need for both remembrance and education. I'll turn to the significance of remembrance first before discussing the ongoing need for Holocaust and genocide education. In 2005, the United Nations General Assembly declared January 27th as an International Day of Commemoration. The selection of this day marked the date in 1945 when Soviet Allied troops liberated Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest of the concentration and death camps. Although Soviets found approximately 6,000 survivors still in the camp, the Nazis had previously transported most of the surviving prisoners westward, many of whom then died on these forced death marches. Of the more than 1.1 million people murdered in Auschwitz itself, most of them were Jews, although we know the Nazis also targeted several other groups for forced labor. January 2021 marks the 76th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Yet, of course, it was not until mid-April 1945 when Allied troops liberated the remaining camps, included Buchenwald, Dachau, and Bergen-Belsen. While the UN selection of this date for International Holocaust Remembrance Day might at first emphasize the efforts of the Allied forces in liberating Nazi concentration camps, I argue this date more significantly commemorates the actions of the Holocaust survivors and victims. In remembering how these individuals lived before the war and how they fought to survive during it, we can honor their memories. The UN noted that the Holocaust, quote, will forever be a warning to all people of the dangers of hatred, bigotry, racism, and prejudice, end quote. It also urged its member states to, quote, develop educational programs that will inculcate future generations with the lessons of the Holocaust in order to help prevent future acts of genocide. These dual acts of remembrance and education serve as the mission of the Hero Center, affiliated with Voices of Hope and the Museum of Jewish Civilization at the University of Hartford. The museum houses a permanent exhibit on local Connecticut Holocaust survivors. When museums, schools, and everything else all but shut down in spring 2020 due to the pandemic, this global emergency actually expedited the creation of the Connecticut Remembers the Holocaust website. Students and the public who could no longer travel to the University of Hartford campus to visit this Holocaust exhibit are now able to read survivor testimonies online. Even a pandemic cannot stop Holocaust remembrance and education. Of course, January 27th is not the only date to commemorate Holocaust victims and survivors. International Holocaust Remembrance Day is a relatively new commemoration, and part of its significance is its international charge that the Holocaust should be remembered throughout the world. Yom HaShoah events, Kristallnacht commemorations, and Tisha B'Av ceremonies also reference the destruction of Jewish life just prior to and during the Holocaust. These various commemorations offer multiple opportunities for remembrance and education. For the numerous families who do not know the specific dates when their loved ones died, these additional ceremonies can serve as a yearly marker in the ongoing mourning process. Yet on this date, January 27th, we can look to the words of Elie Wiesel when he stated, "If anything can, it is memory that will save humanity." It is this need to remember and commemorate that will sustain future generations from witnessing further genocide. Thank you.
Memory is what shapes us. Memory is what teaches us. We must understand that's where our redemption is.
We gather today to mourn the loss of so many lives and celebrate those who saved them, honor those who survived, and contemplate the obligations of the living.
Days of Remembrance is our nation's annual commemoration of the Holocaust. This time that was both a blight on the history of humanity, but also a shining moment for the people who were brave enough to put an end to it.
We are remembering, first and foremost, all the victims. And that is not only the Jewish victims, but there were many non-Jewish victims. Of course, the Jews were the primary target.
The millions of innocent people, including my family and friends, who were killed because they were of the wrong religion, because they had no means of protecting themselves.
It's also important to remember the rescuers. These were people who risked not only their own lives, sometimes the lives of their family, to save a fellow human being. And we also remember our American soldiers who were fighting to win World War II, and in the course of that, liberated these concentration camps.
Those that arrived at the camps in 1945 and were just horrified with what they saw.
That was a huge task for the American soldiers to help bring humanity back to these people who had been dehumanized for years, to give them medical care.
Looking back allows us to understand how important it is for us to serve in a country where we have the strength and the might and the will to defend those that are defenseless.
So Days of Remembrance is an opportunity for us to remember the suffering that was and the efforts that were made to put an end to such suffering. And it's a call to conscience today in our world to make sure that we aren't the silent ones standing by, contributing to the suffering of others.
In 1945, at the end of the war, I would have thought that there would never be another Holocaust, that the world was so shocked by what had happened that the world would not permit that. And yet you see what happened in Bosnia, what happened in Rwanda, what happened in Darfur. So there are still millions of people being persecuted because of their ethnicity.
It's really a moral challenge to us to do more in our own lives when we confront injustice or hatred or genocide.
Those who suffered and died in the Holocaust, we can honor them today by not being silent. Remembering ties the past and the present together with a powerful, simple thread. This is not right.
The important thing is that one should not become indifferent to the suffering of others, that one should not stand by and just raise one's hands and say, there's nothing I can do, I'm just a little one person. Because I think what every one of us does matters.
It's not enough to curse the darkness of the past. Above all, we have to illuminate the future. And I think that on the day of remembrance, the most important thing is to remember the humanity that is in all of us, to leave the world better for our children and for posterity.
On behalf of my brother Stephen and our families, we would like to thank Voices of Hope for honoring our mother, Bea Israel of blessed memory, with this year's Chesed Award. Mom embodied all of what Voices of Hope stands for and felt that the answer to hatred was to show your love and understanding to your fellow man. She embraced Voices of Hope mission of Holocaust education and how it can help bring about understanding and real change in the midst of today's changing social climate. Mom spoke to students and at Holocaust events where she would share her childhood memories of living in Germany during the early days leading up to the Holocaust. What she enjoyed most of all was the one-on-one conversations she had with individual students. Recently, Olivia Geller, a bat mitzvah student, told Voices of Hope about a project she was doing for her bat mitzvah to honor a young girl that had died in the Holocaust who never got to experience her bat mitzvah. Olivia also wanted to include speaking to a Holocaust survivor as part of her project. Voices of Hope asked Mom if she would help with this request, and of course she agreed. Because of the pandemic, the interview was conducted over the phone. In honor of our mother, Olivia set up a fundraiser to collect donations for Voices of Hope so they can continue to provide Holocaust and genocide education to students. The following are excerpts from her bat mitzvah and conversations with my mom.
Chesed, the Hebrew word for kindness, is a word used to describe the kindness or love between people, devotion to God, as well as love towards humanity. Chesed is central to Jewish ideals. I had the amazing opportunity to interview Bea Israel, a Holocaust survivor. In my hour-and-a-half conversation with her, I learned a number of life lessons, but one in particular about Chesed stood out to me. Bea shared a memory from where she grew up in Germany. When Hitler came to power and everyone turned on her family because they were Jewish, their non-Jewish neighbors, the Webers, helped them and were kind to them.
And they were my mother's dearest friends, the woman of the house. And they had a tremendous farm and property. On their door, main door, it's not a house door, it's a farm door. the Nazis, the brown shirts, wrote on their property store, Judenfreund, big and painted on. They were my mom's best friends.
This horrible act was done to shame the Webbers for being kind to Bea's family. This kindness was always remembered by Bea's family, and they are in touch with the Webbers' descendants this day. This act of Chesed shown by the Webbers towards Bea family is so important, and we should all treat each other kindly, no matter our differences.
That's why I learned to tolerate all kinds of people. We're all human beings, and God was always with us. And I'm a big believer. I am.
I feel blessed that I was able to hear her story, and I will always remember her and her story. We are lucky to live in a community with an organization called Voices of Hope. Voices of Hope is an educational organization created by descendants of Holocaust survivors across Connecticut. It promotes a culture of courage and to stand up against hatred through Holocaust and genocide education and remembrance. Voices of Hope provided me the opportunity to interview Bea Israel. There are so many parts of her interview that I always remember and never forget. One of the interesting parts of her story was when she discussed emigrating from Germany to the U.S. She was only a few years younger than I was when she came here, and I am. She told me she was considered a refugee and how difficult it was to fit in at her school in Brooklyn, New York. She didn't speak English, and the kids weren't friendly towards her. It reminds me of immigrants and refugees today. They, too, have to struggle when coming home. We have been refugees over time, and we should understand how it feels to come to a new place and seek freedom and a better life. Over and over in our interview, Bea would mention how grateful she was for the United States and how much she loved it here. Sometimes we take what we have for granted, and being the luxury of being born in a country with the rights and freedoms we have.
We are the first generation born after the darkness. Through our parents' memories, words, and silence, we are linked to that annihilated Jewish existence whose echoes permeate our consciousness.
We dedicate this pledge to you, our parents who suffered and survived, to our grandparents who perished in the flames, to our banished brothers and sisters, more than 1 million Jewish children so brutally murdered.
To all 6 million whose unyielding spiritual and physical resistance, even in the camps and ghettos, exemplifies our people's commitment to life.
We pledge to remember. We pledge to remember.
We shall teach our children to preserve forever that uprooted Jewish spirit which could not be destroyed.
We shall tell the world of the depths to which humanity can sink and the heights which were attained, even in hell itself.
We shall fight anti-Semitism and all forms of racial hatred by our dedication to freedom throughout the world.
We affirm our commitment to the State of Israel and to the furtherance of Jewish life in our homeland.
We pledge ourselves to the oneness of the Jewish people.
We are your children. We are here. Wir sind du.
day. We'll speak out to future generations. We'll be saved. We won't close our eyes and fear and hide. We'll let our beauty reign. Nothing stands between us and the world we dream to know. We were made to love no matter how much hate we face. We will fight for those who cannot fight and need our strength. Won't close our eyes in fear and hide. We'll let our beauty reign. Nothing stands between us and the world we dream to know. We'll break the silence, screaming words of hope. Won't be silent, won't be silent. We'll break the silence, screaming words of hope. We won't be silent, won't be silent. We'll break the silence, screaming words of hope. Won't be silent, won't be silent. We'll break the silence. We're screaming words of hope. Won't be silent, won't be silent, won't be silent. We'll break the silence. Screaming words of hope. We'll break the silence, screaming words of Won't be silent, not for one more day. We'll speak out to future generations. We'll be saved. We won't close our eyes and fear and hide. We'll let our beauty reign. Nothing stands between us and the world we dream to know. We were made to love no matter how much hate we face. We will fight for those who cannot fight and need our strength. Won't close our eyes in fear and hide. We'll let our beauty reign. Nothing stands between us and the world we dream to know. We'll break the silence, screaming words of hope.
My name is Alan Berkowitz. As a founding member of Voices of Hope and chair of tonight's program, I couldn't be more pleased about the work that's being done by Voices of Hope in our state and beyond to impart the hard lessons of the Shoah and encourage everyone to apply them to our daily lives. My father and father-in-law were survivors of this cataclysmic event in human history. Their memory and the memory of millions of other targets of genocidal oppression motivate us to one day make the words, "never again," ring true. We have much to do, and each and every one of us is an important part in making this world a better place at home and abroad. International Holocaust Remembrance Day is a time to commemorate those who fell victim to an evil ideology of hate and division. They perished because so many people were unwilling to speak out and remain silent. It's also a time to encourage the development of educational programming that informs and promotes responsible social action against the worst that human beings are capable of inflicting on one another. It's a time to honor and celebrate the survivors of these atrocities as they guide us to learn and teach what is just and right. It's been a privilege to get to know many of our local survivors over the years. You have given yourselves to educate our youth and our communities. You've given us a gift that we can never repay, nor was it ever intended to be repaid, that of unconditional love and support. Your example has inspired numerous individuals to take on the charge to never be silent when hate raises its ugly head. And as we work to convey your messages to humanity, we should do so with a clear mind and open heart. You are our parents, our loved ones, mentors, friends. We mourn those who have died this past year. We remember all those who were persecuted for no other reason than the faith into which they were born. We remember those who perished due to persecution and injustice. We remember all of you. There is no hierarchy to suffering, only the lingering consequences of these incidents of intolerance. Please join me in a moment of silence in their memory. Thank you. Before my final comments, allow me to thank our wonderful co-sponsor, the Jewish Federation Association of Connecticut, and the following community partners: the Jewish Federation of Greater Hartford, the Jewish Community Foundation of Greater Hartford, Nilde Sansone at Lasting Image, the Emmanuel Synagogue, the Emmanuel Synagogue's Brotherhood, the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies, JT Connect, Young Israel, the Mandel JCC, Jewish Family Services, Meriden Public Library, Miss Rona Golub, and the Greater Hartford Interfaith Action Alliance. A big thank you to my fellow committee members for your insight and passion. And a hearty shout out to our professional staff for helping to make our visions a reality. Now, please keep an eye on our website as our 2021 calendar of programs and events continue to grow. Be sure to visit our virtual exhibit, Connecticut Remembers the Holocaust, and our social media accounts for the latest updates on all of Voices of Hope's events. Also, please mark your calendar for our Yom HaShoah commemoration on April 8th, followed by the reading of names on April 9th, and an Evening of Hope on October 20th. All the upcoming programs will be virtual until we can safely be together again. Now, we want to extend our most sincere gratitude to each and every one of you who is watching tonight, whether you're a student, educator, parent, survivor, descendant, or someone wanting to learn more about this history. We thank you for your passion and unwavering support of Voices of Hope's mission. Finally, I'd like to share that there were approximately 700 million people living in pre-war Europe. Of course, we often speak of the 6 million Jews who were murdered during that war. Do we think about the contributions that they could have made to our world? We'll never know. How many more would have perished without the courage of a small and no doubt significant number of those who refused to remain silent, both in word and deed. They included Christian and Muslim clergy, Polish nannies, friends and neighbors, and people who didn't even know the names of those they were helping. These non-Jews risked everything, their lives, and even the lives of their loved ones, to help a fellow human being in need. Tragically, a number of these people would pay the ultimate price for their humanity. How does their example of courage, under the most extreme of circumstances, inform our own actions today? I leave you with a few words from Holocaust scholar, Professor Yehuda Bauer. Maybe we should add 3 additional commandments to the original 10. You, your children, and your children's children shall never become perpetrators. You, your children, and your children's children shall never, ever allow yourselves to become victims. And you, your children, and your children's children shall never, never be passive onlookers to mass murder, genocide, or may it never be repeated, a Holocaust-like tragedy. Thank you, and good night.